Hello, I'm Chuck Phillip, and welcome to episode 5 that I'm doing on Fairhope, Alabama. This is really part 2 of the Fairhope Pier. So if you haven't seen part 1, I'm welcome you to go take a look at that as well. I'm also doing some stories on the organic school. I'm a local historian, and so I've got some pretty interesting stories on this channel, and it's a mix of both home preservation topics, especially the issues that face our homes here due to the brutal climate that we're in. I'm a former home inspector, and I also give history tours as well. And so if you want to get a little trip together with that, we can do that. And so anyway, I figure I'll go ahead and start off with this. I'm pulling up here to the pier, and this holds a special place in my heart since I've been going down here pretty much all my life. But you got to think back, before the 1920s, there were a lot of piers that went all up and down the eastern shore, even further south of Fairhope. And that's how people got back and forth across the bay. Most people, I'd say back then, lived in Mobile, and they had their summer homes over here, and they would stay over here in the summertime, or they would just simply travel back and forth between Mobile and the eastern shore. And so before there were cars, they were probably ferrying over their horses and mules and carts. And then when cars came around, well, they started ferrying them across. Well, they started working on the causeway, which we know as the causeway, in I think around 1926. And that was pretty much completed about a year and a half. That project went relatively quick. It's amazing how quick that went, especially when you look at how long it takes to build roads now. But anyway, it was pretty much completed around 1927, and so there wasn't that much of a need anymore for people to ferry back and forth across the bay via steamer, even though there were still people doing it. But that's kind of sort of what dried it all up. I mean, with the causeway being completed, you had now transportation that can get over here. Now, the entire span across the bay was called the Cochrane Bridge. And of course, a lot of us old heads still call that Africatown Bridge the Cochrane Bridge. But before they built that big one there, which is called the Africatown Bridge now, it was a drawbridge. And my dad used to work at Scott Paper back in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And I would go over there with him sometimes. And it was kind of a spooky bridge to go across, because if you got on that thing with a truck, the whole thing would shake. It was really a scary experience going across that bridge. They probably should have left it up and turned it into an attraction. But anyway, the whole span all the way across the causeway was called the Cochrane Bridge. And so when that got completed, that sort of dried up all the landings all up and down the eastern shore. And the funny thing is, you still have a ferry at Dauphin Island that goes back and forth between there and Fort Morgan. But this pier, it was a bustling place, back, I would say, probably in the 1920s and before that, and probably all the way up into maybe the 30s. And so pretty much what it is now is just a good old long, quarter-mile long concrete pier, which you can actually get some pretty good exercise walking on. And that's been there. I think they got that completed in the late 60s because they still had a wooden pier there. In fact, I remember the casino still standing is what they called the casino. I don't think it was actually a gambling casino. I just think that's what they called it. That was still standing there. And so, basically after that got taken down, it's pretty much been the same all this time. And they had a restaurant here, and it's been several restaurants over the years, but I think the very first one that was there was the Yard Arm, and that was a pretty good place to go eat. It was more, a kind of a cool place to take your date and just kind of overlook the water, and they had pretty decent food, the best I can remember. And it's looking like it's going to be something else now, so we'll just have to wait and see how all that turns out. But anyway, it's been a fishing pier, and when I went to organic school, back in the 60s and 70s. We took several trips down to this thing. It was a long walk too, from Organic all the way down to here, and we had to walk it back as well. And I remember, one of the first trips I took down here, there was a girl in our class, and they have these lower platforms down here, and I'm not sure how it came about, but anyway, she fell in, and so she had to walk all the way back to school soaking wet. And I kind of wonder, well, maybe she just wanted to go swimming. It sounds like something I would have done. So there's been some pretty interesting stories that I can tell you about this pier and experiences I've had here. I remember back in the 80s, I would hang out down here, and there was a police officer that worked the pier at that time. His name was Tarver, and I loved hanging out with him. And I don't know, I guess we just hit it off. And so I'd spend hours down there talking to him. And I remember one night we were down there, and there was these two guys not supposed to be drinking out here on this pier, especially with bottles. And so they were sitting on one of these lower platforms, had the ice chest between them, and they were sucking them down. And I heard bloop bloop. That's where they dropped their beers in the water. They saw Tarver coming toward them, so they dropped the beers in the water, and they had this ice chest between them. So Tarver says, "What do y'all have in that ice chest?" And they didn't say a word to him. They just grabbed the ice chest and jumped in the water with it. And so that really created a spectacular night, because the Coast Guard lifted off, and they were out there with their searchlight trying to spot them. They were all up underneath the pier. Some people were actually casting their lines up under there hoping they could snag them. It was kind of nutty. It was funny too. And then they got, I don't think Fairhope had a search and rescue at the time. They may have, but I think the Daphne search and rescue, or both of them, came out and patrolled the waters down there. They finally did get them and brought them in soaking wet. And so I think what they should have done is just showed Tarver the beer. He'd probably just told him to take it back to the truck. He was a pretty cool cop. And so anyway, they made it a lot worse for themselves by doing that, but it made an entertaining evening for everybody that was on the pier. And so that's another story, that I thought was kind of funny I'd share. Another one was this. I was down there fishing myself one night, and there was this man up there throwing a cast net, and he threw it, and when he did, it snatched his false teeth out, and both the net and the teeth went flying in the water. And man, he started panicking about that. He says, "Man, I paid over $1,000 for those teeth." I says, "I got to get them back." I said, "Well, see if you can catch them back." And so he casted his net out there, and on the first try, got them back. I says, "Me talking about luck." So I think he tried to figure out another way to throw that net without using his teeth after that. And so that was another kind of a cool story that I witnessed down there. Now they have these viewers that you can walk up to, and I think they're a quarter now. I didn't look to see how much it cost, but I think back when I remember them and used them, it was a dime. And that's Seacoast Manufacturing, and they're actually in Fairhope, and they make these viewers that go all over the world. And so if you're, in Canada, I guess around the world, and you see one of these things, that's more than likely it was made in Fairhope, Alabama. And it's a little small mom and pop company that's still making these. And they're actually pretty good too. I mean, you can really see quite a bit with one of these. And you can even see Mobile depending on, how clear the weather is. So I thought that was a kind of cool thing to stumble across down here. Now, when you get on further out toward the end, there's this awning there that goes out to get out of the sun. And I looked up and I saw Kimco on there. Well, Kimco has been around for a long time, and that was one of my first jobs. It's off of Pollard Road. They make these steel buildings. And so if I figured, I'd throw this in there as for nostalgia as well, because they are a local company that built this. I also think they built the gym at the school that I went to, organic school, back around 70, 71. And you can see it makes a little T out here on the end. And, you know, a lot of people come out to the far end to fish this. It is deeper out here. But just know that depending on the tides, you can walk all the way out to the end of this thing in the water. And so that's why I think there has been some people that's gotten hurt pretty bad diving off this pier. They think it's deeper than what it is, and it's not. And of course, it's filled in over time too. Now, the thing that brought me here more than anything was back in the 80s and 90s, I was really into the Jubilees. And what a Jubilee is where the oxygen content gets low in the water. And when that happens, when certain conditions are met, these fish will start coming to the surface and then eventually start coming up toward the shoreline. And I'm going to do a separate video on Jubilees, which if you're into that, you're going to really want to see that one. But I'm trying to keep this video short. But I would come down here and check the water to see what it looked like, scouting for Jubilees, and I'd do that all up and down the eastern shore till I figured out where I thought the thing may come in. And sometimes it was hit and miss, but most of the time I've gotten pretty good at predicting where they would come in. So that was pretty much what I would do out here on the pier, is to either come out and look for Jubilees or occasionally fish and sometimes crab. But that was mostly back during the 80s and 90s. And then on the other part where the parking lot was, and also on the, I guess called the North Beach, as a teenager, we'd just hang out there. That was a teenager hangout, you know, for all of us kids that went to school all up and down the eastern shore. Like I say, I went to organic, but, you know, most of the people that went to Fairhope High at that time were from Spanish Fort and Daphne too, so everybody went to that. That was the only high school that we had that they didn't have Daphne High or Spanish Fort High back then. And so they would also have some pretty big celebrations down here too. And I would say this is probably the biggest thing that Fairhope Pier had, was every 4th of July they had their 4th of July bash down here, and Fairhope would launch fireworks, and it was an all day and night event. And we would go and try to secure that pavilion down there on the North Beach so we could have it to ourselves. We'd kind of camp out at that the night before. But they would have some really good bands too that would play here. And during the day they would also have all kinds of different things going on. Like this is a pole climbing contest, a grease pole climbing. I remember that was pretty popular back then. It was funny too. And there's a few people I got hurt a little bit doing it, but you know, it was fun. And too bad we still don't have these sort of things going on. You know, it'd be nice if people would put their cell phones down and enjoy life and start interacting with each other instead of staying on the phones all day. But I might make a separate story out of that. So, you know, over time, I would say most people in Fairhope would either come down here and use this pier for fishing, or just simply come down here and walk this thing for exercise and just enjoy a beautiful sunset. You know, some of the most spectacular sunsets you're going to find right down here. Now, walking back, you know, I was looking back toward the shoreline and looking back at those old houses there, and that reminded me of a lot of those houses were probably owned by people who lived in Mobile, and that was their summer homes. But when you get on further south of this, you got the American Legion. It's both on top of the hill the building is, but they got a real nice area down below the bluff, and you got a tiki bar and another pier there, and they're trying to get the building refurbished. And so I want to encourage you people, if you can, to go out there and support them. You don't have to be a veteran to do this. They would appreciate any donations you can give them to get their building back going again. But I like the American Legion very well because it's just a great group of people that run that there. at least take the time to go down and check it out for yourself. Now, across the street from that is Gambino's restaurant, which is very good. And when you go further south of these two places here, that's where you get to Point Clear and the Grand Hotel. Now, there are some other good restaurants along this scenic 98 road, so just know that as well. Well, I'm going to come back off this pier and head back out into the parking lot and cross back over into what I call the Rose Garden. Now, this wasn't here back in the 70s. In fact, where the pole climbing thing was held, that was where that was. But I think sometime in the 80s is when they put the fountain here and did the Rose Garden. And you'll see a lot of times this fountain is not activated because the wind coming off the bay out there will blow the water out of it. But there's a lot of pennies out there, so I guess they probably take that money there and use it to help keep the pier up. And I didn't notice a pier cop there when I was there during the daytime, but I don't think they've ever had one during the day. I think it's mostly at night where they maintain the pier cop. And I haven't seen Tarver in decades. If he's still out there, I want to salute him and say hello to him as well. I was hoping I could find a picture of him to put in the story. Well, this is going to conclude part 2 of the pier, and I'm going to do a couple more episodes on Fairhope. I've also got about 5 episodes up on the organic school, and I know there's some people that want me to get more of those up, and I am going to do it. I've got some people that are going to get me some 8mm films of the school, and so I'm waiting for that. Hopefully they can get back with me so I can add that to the story. And also, too, if you have any 8mm film, whether it be 8 or Super 8, I could use it to make splices, and also have the capability of converting these too. So if you've been wanting to have your films converted to digital format, I can do that. So just contact me if you can, or put it in comments, or you can also email me. I'll have that in the description box below. But thanks again, guys, for subscribing to this channel. I appreciate your support. This is a non-monetized channel. I get no money for doing this. So I appreciate you subscribing to it. And also, if you want to be notified when the next one comes out, just click the notification bell, and it'll let you know when I get that next episode up. Take care, guys.